a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Are you interested in virtual reality, gaming, and crypto? Well, on today's podcast, I have Wang. He is recognized globally as a pioneer and leader in XR gaming and crypto industries. In 2020, Ryan co-founded Zebra Labs, a Web3 company dedicated to bringing celebrities to the metaverse by creating virtual celebrities and digital collectibles. In 2015, Ryan co-founded Outpost Capital, a cross-border early-stage venture funded based in San Francisco and China, focusing on metaverse, AI, VR, AR, blockchain, gaming, esports, transmedia, and digital entertainment. Outpost Capital has been rated multiple times as one of the top XR investment brands in Silicon Valley and the world. And so without any further delay, I'd like to welcome Ryan. Hey, so glad you could be here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. You hit all of my favorite buzzwords across the border, and so I'm excited to have you on and really go deep on the topics, man. You seem to be at the edge of everything, of all this technology, of however you want to define the metaverse or whatever you want to call it. You seem to be there, and I'd love to kind of kick things off by understanding, like, how did you get started in this bleeding edge technology?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think you mentioned about my definition about the metaverse, right?
Yeah.
So I think metaverse as a buzzword has been like buzzing everybody's ears for the past 2-3 years, and it has multiple definitions. But my definition is that simple, right? What is metaverse? Well, metaverse are virtual worlds, right? And inside the virtual world, you can have different digital experiences. You can connect with each other in digital ways, right? So it's that simple. It's just virtual world, right? And in terms of how I got onto this journey, I actually started my career as an investment banker, right? Day in, day out, I work very hard. And I feel like, it was super interesting when I first got started. But over a little bit of time, it feels that the work started to get a little bit repetitive. And I wanted to do something that's more interesting and more creative. And at that point, I heard about, all these exciting companies, early stage, coming out of Silicon Valley, right? They are achieving a lot of success, and they are capturing a lot of public's attention as well. So in around 2014, 2015, I traveled a few times to the Valley, and also I discovered this new technology called virtual reality. And I just got hooked with what's going on in this industry, and I decided to figure out my way to start a career in this sector as well. So a year later, I started Outpost Capital, which is a new investment brand. Back then, focused on frontier technology investment, and we have a heavy focus on the VR AR side of the frontier technology sector, right? And since then, we've been kind of riding these waves with different industries, including VR, AR, including crypto, including artificial intelligence, and also digital entertainment. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
That's awesome, brother. Yeah, it's really interesting. And one thing as well is when you're talking about this interesting technology, sometimes you get proficient in one industry and you're looking for something exciting, something that can kind of get you up and going in the morning. Did you have, I know for myself, I had like mind-blowing experiences when I tried out VR, and that's what got me into the whole VR development space. Did you ever have a moment with virtual reality technology that kind of blew your mind and kind of let you know what was possible?
Yes. In the if we think about the early days in the VR industry, right, there has been a very polarized opinions about Google Cardboard, right? Some people think that it brings the barrier of the consumer barrier to entry to very low, right? So that it's very easy for consumers to adopt. Versus a lot of people think that the quality that a cardboard experience is able to deliver is not that high, so it cannot represent what real virtual reality is. Well, to be honest, my first ever VR experience was a cardboard experience, right?
Yeah.
So someone showed me that, hey, this paper thing, and put the phone inside, and boom, you can see things in 3D, and it's actually a 360 video. So it wasn't nearly close to anything we see, any of the amazing experience that we see today, but I feel like to be able to have a simple device that's able to transform this experience from more of a seeing looking into the metaverse through a screen type of like a window based peeking inside that type of experience into the type of experience where you feel fully immersed, right? You are part of it, and you switch your perspective from third person to first person so that you can start feel how this like virtual events, virtual objects, virtual environment is impacting you directly, and also psychologically, right? I think that's super powerful, and that can turn the whole digital experience, that can redefine what the human relationship with different digital experience, and you know potentially also a opportunity to redefine the term computing as well, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that was my initial aha moment with VR,
Mhm.
and after I go deeper on this rabbit hole, I discovered like the DK1, DK2. I become a Kickstarter backer, and I just
Oh, for the
did
Oculus?
way to get into the industry.
Yeah. Were you a backer on the Oculus for a Kickstarter?
Yeah,
Oh, me too. That's awesome.
there you go.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then you're old school in that space, man. I,
Yeah,
I remember that
definitely.
when you first got the headset in, and then you put it on, and then your
Hmm.
your mind's blown at like what's possible. I think mine was like Zelda. I put on Zelda and for the DK1, and I was like, oh my god, someone made Zelda in VR. This is possible. So that's
Hmm.
cool. I mean, I think you're even ahead than I am. That's incredible.
Yeah,
Well,
I guess similar time, but I never did the Zelda experience. So back
uh,
then, I was
probably
just
got
in
sued.
my apartment, and downloading all these experiences from the Oculus developer portal,
Yeah.
and just trying a lot of things out, and just getting amazed by what this can deliver.
Well, since you're so deep in the different spaces, right? You have a
Hmm.
crossover between VR and crypto and AI and all those things. Sometimes it's a lot of hype, right? People think
Right.
that people try to use VR where it doesn't make sense. People try to use artificial intelligence where it doesn't make sense. People use
Hmm.
crypto where it doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
To you, like, what do you feel is the thing that has a good crossover that adds a lot of value? How do you think what is a good sign or a good use for these types of technologies?
Right. So first of all, when I am approaching a new industry, a new sector, right, I
Yeah.
always try to, other than just learning about the basics, I always try to understand, what's different about this industry, and what is hard to replicate. Uh, what are the values that delivered by the industry that is hard to replicate by some other industries, right? So I think, like you mentioned, there are a lot of each of these words are buzzword on a certain level, and there are a lot of hypes in each of these sectors, right? So I will always try to find out, hey, what's different um, for this technology? What can it deliver?
Mhm.
And also, what's the downside, right? What's a cost? For example, VR is amazing when you have the first experience, but it it can be costly, it can be bulky, it causes so many like motion sickness and different reactions. So that's a downside of the technology, right? And also blockchain, it's good that it's decentralized, it's trustless, right? It's immutable. But the downside is that it's very inefficient because it's a trustless network, right? So by having like, similar computation on a single centralized PC versus EVM, the EVM takes so much more computing power to do the computation logics than a centralized architecture. So that's a downside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key thing is, first of all, not to just buy into the hype, buy into the technology, but understand the pros and cons of what each of the technology can deliver here, right? And the other thing is that I think each of these sectors are actually emerging sectors, right? Meaning they are very, very early in terms of the life cycle of this technology, right? We are at the very beginning, and probably for anything that will have fundamental influence and fundamental changes to how the general public is going to use this technology on an everyday basis, right? How it's going to have meaningful impact in each of everyone's everyday life. It's gonna be a journey that take years or even decades to fulfill, right? So sometimes we feel like, oh, VR feels like an overnight success, and then crypto feels like an overnight success, right? But this kind of overnight success is mostly the impression from a outsider perspective. But being an insider, when you are inside the industry, you understand how much struggling that each of the creators and builders in that space have been going through to reach to that tipping point where things can change and adoption can happen overnight, right? So I think the other thing is to not underestimate the type of work and the amount of time that all these builders have put in to reach to this tipping point. And the
Yeah.
third thing that I like to mention is that the a lot of people, and also when I'm talking to a lot of companies, right? No matter it's a VR company or blockchain company, I feel like 90% of the companies always mention, hey, by 2025 or by 2027, the VR market, the blockchain market, the metaverse market will be what kind of size, and this is how we're going to capitalize and take a pie of that kind of market that we are chasing in, right? But the situation in these emerging sectors is that you know as a entrepreneur, you can't just wait until things happen, right? You can't just take it for granted that the industry will become what kind of size after a few years. This is I think one of the good example is the VR industry back in like 2014, 2015. We always have this kind of projection that by 2018, by 2020, it's going to be a multi-billion dollar market, and it's going to impacting everybody's life. And what if it doesn't happen, right? What if things are not going as expected? So I think, as a creator, as a builder, and as a leader in this space, the right question to ask is that what can you do to drive adoption, right? What can you do to create this marketplace? What can you do to um, to incentivize the users to pick up this technology and use it in their everyday life, instead of just relying on the assumption that, hey, 5 years down the road it's gonna be big, right? So I think it's better to ask what you can do today to make that happen instead of
Yeah.
relying on that to happen.
I love that. There's so much in there that I think is on point. One of the things being is, one, when you're on the outside in, everything looks easier, right?
Mhm.
Whether or not that someone's a movie star, or say influencer, or they built a big old company, or you're Elon Musk. You're like, oh, must have been easy to be you. Must have been easy to be you. I have it so hard. They don't realize they discount all of the effort, all the times that person chose the harder path again and again and again, and they don't stop to look back. And that's the same thing with the industry. This technology doesn't build itself. It takes all of us individually working together. we work on it, and then we push together as a collective whole in an industry, whether that's crypto or VR or AI. And it takes a lot of effort, man. It takes a lot of developers. I mean, there's a lot of money spent and a lot of money burnt going through and making these learning paths. I mean, the movie industry was, invented way back in the day. And I know Walt Disney had to carve his own path, making color animations and beyond that. And for us, we're still at that phase of carving the path. And one thing you're talking about, it's not waiting for the industry to be big enough and for you to step in to capture it, but for you to be big enough that you can create a movement and drive adoption on your own. For example, let's say Beat Saber. Beat Saber drove so much adoption into the industry. It didn't wait for the adoption to get there. It used the resources that were available, and it was so compelling as a thing, it created adoption. So be the movement. Don't wait for the movement to happen is what I'm hearing from you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. When you're talking about this, being on both the creator space and being on the investor space, and you're talking about some of these common pitfalls, mistakes that people make when they approach you and talk about this. Oh, the market size is going to be X billion, and we're going to capture 2% of that market. So therefore, we're going to make this many billions of dollars, and that's why you should invest. What are you really looking for? What do you really wish that these people that approach you for investment actually say to you?
Well, the part of the life being a specialized venture capitalist instead of a generic venture capitalist is that you focus on very specific sectors, right? And over the time, it's kind of like double-edged sword. So on the positive side, you can go very deep into certain very nitty-gritty topics, right? But on the flip side, you people from certain industry and especially startup founders from certain communities, they tend to see the similar opportunities. They tend to have similar mentalities, and also they tend to kind of like live in a shared dream to a certain extent, right? So the consequence of this kind of situation is that I think there are almost it's very rare to see completely new ideas and completely new products or new technologies for each of the sectors, right? You see at least like 5 or 10 other companies who are working on similar directions, who are having similar visions or chasing similar um, goals, right? And the way to differentiate one company from the other is mostly relies on who are the team, right? What are their approach, and how are they applying this technology or their product different from all the other companies, right? So I think one of the really one of the key thing that I look into is that how does this company different from the other 5 companies who's chasing similar opportunity? What's unique approach that this company take, right? And why this approach is better than the other companies or even some of companies that's more established, right? So remember, before we started the show, I asked you the question, hey, how is this hero reality podcast different from Team First, right?
Yeah.
So that's like a similar way on how I think about the situation here, and I'm trying to find that, hey, this is interesting because this company, although they are chasing the same opportunity, but they are taking a completely different approach. And this different approach, if executed well, what kind of consequences does it lead to? Or, if it, ran into certain situations, right, then what's a plan B? And what's the outcome will look like?
Got it. So what you're really saying is that because people live in a certain industry, they have the same common speak, they have the same market share. They know that, virtual reality has learning times 4x versus traditional medias or whatever the numbers might be to the states they're pulling. But there really is about, okay, what's the team? And
Mhm.
how is your strategy different than everybody else? And what you're trying to understand is what's that value gap between their thinking and their mindset and their execution versus the other one? Because everyone can see the same vision. We're going to make the metaverse or the next thingy or whatever it might be. But
Right.
really, it's about how are they approaching it in a unique way that can actually drive adoption and probably lower friction. That might
Mhm.
be one of the big major things that people have, especially with thinking of these types of technologies, because it's so hard. You have to first understand it, and then you got to want it, and then you got to drive people to take action on the things that they both want and understand, which is you got to be able to hit all those buckets at the same time, which isn't easy when someone's just trying to spin all these other plates going on at the same time as a entrepreneur.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And this remind me, one of the example is that in the past 2 years, in the crypto and Web3 industry, there's a term that has been used a lot by founders in this space, which I hate. That term is called gamify, right? So almost like all the Web3 company, all the crypto company are talking about how they are going to open up their virtual space, selling their virtual land, having their avatars, right, and gamify their ecosystem, right. I
Yeah.
think having having the word gamify doesn't really make too much sense to me. I think it's a great thing to be able to understand the concept of metaverse and to also proactively embrace the concept of metaverse in your product and your service. But gamify specifically, first of all, it's challenging to develop a high quality game, right? It
Hmm.
takes like years of hands-on game development experience. And
Yeah.
secondly, gamify is not something that's magical. It doesn't mean that you have a, a quality game and then consumers will jump in and start playing your game. It doesn't go that naturally, right? It takes a
Yeah.
lot of effort to figure out what's your user acquisition strategy. How do you incentivize people to play more? How do you design all these product features so that users feel like they are engaging with the product, they have emotional bindings with the product, and also create a healthy social ecosystem between different players and between different users. So it's more like it's more like a journey of
Yeah.
years of crafting and development. But in the world of crypto and Web3, just feel like the word gamify has been picked up so many times, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
I 100%, I 100% agree with you. As someone who I design these types of applications, and
Mhm,
people think of gamification, it's a band-aid for user adoption and retention. It's
mhm,
not a solution. And gamification is just a flashy word for driving human behavior. How do you drive human behavior to take the action you want them to take? It's like macro leadership. You create this environment that compels people to go into it again, again, and again. And people think of gamification as points, levels, and badges. But that's not it. That's the outwards, extrinsic. That's just looking at like, oh, the I don't know, the bodybuilder's got big muscles and
mhm.
therefore he must, be in the gym all the time, where there's a bunch of different ways to drive that result. They're not so gamification is a nuanced game where you study the human behaviors, you understand how people think better than they do, and you put systems and processes in place to where it makes them want to take action again and again and again, and they come back, not just in the short term. And the easiest ones for the crypto space is scarcity, right? They use a lot of
Mhm.
scarcity, a lot of FOMO, a lot of status. Everybody else is doing it. A lot of
Right.
it's so in that space, and that right there only lasts so long. That kind of has this blitz attack, and unless you can continually drive demand, the scarcity does not last because it pumps in and then you get
Mhm,
that dump, right? And then
mhm.
over time, then there's that disillusion with the belief in the system, like land scarcity, which is one of the big issues in that whole crypto space. So yeah, gamification, unless you really study it and understand it, it's like artificial intelligence, but they don't actually, it's just a if then that bot, right? That's not technically kind of a sort of artificial intelligence, but not really. it's
Right.
it's not it's not that level. So I think that's absolutely right. And so how do you, when you talk about driving user adoption, getting people to take on user acquisitions, getting them to uh, come back to a product again and again and again. What are some things that you've seen that have been effective?
Well, I think, when we are talking about a consumer product, right?
Hmm.
I think, the whole space of this, different technology can be generally divided into like the B2B category and the B2C category, right? On the B2B realm, things are a little bit more straightforward, right? You come up with a solution, you deliver value to your customers, and then, it bring them more revenue, it save them the cost, everything makes sense, right? In the B2C world, however, things could be way complicated, right? But I think, one of the key features that I think, have been kind of proven to be quite effective is that is on the social side, right? So it's one thing to deliver a good experience to one individual, but if there are ways for you to deliver a shared experience to a group or community, then things can be exponentially more powerful, right? The power of the social network itself. So I think if we look at, for example, the success of the NFT industry, well, the value of the NFT industry, I think, is not quite from the IP by itself, right? But it's more coming from the value of the community behind it. That's why, for all the NFT projects, their key hire, in addition to the artists, right, is really like the community managers, and also for as an investor, when we look into most NFT communities, IP is one dimension, right? The utility of the NFT is another dimension, but a very important dimension is really what's the community look like, what's the culture in this community, what kind of different social dynamics are happening between members in this community, right? And similarly, in for example, for metaverse or VR, right? You were just talking about Beat Saber, and
Hmm.
the success of Beat Saber. One, it brings music with VR, right? Both of music itself is an immersive media, and VR is also an immersive media. So the combination itself is very powerful. But beyond that, I think the social features that build around Beat Saber is a key factor that lead to the success of the product. In that, as a player, I can also become a content creator very easily, right? I can do all these mixed reality videos, and if my friends or my audience say I'm playing it, they will be like, oh, I want to play it as well, right? And
Hmm.
recently, Beat Saber also launched the multiplayer mode
Yep.
within the product, so that you can play with your friends as well. So I think this kind of social features are really helping people to not only pick up the technology by themselves, but also use this technology in a social environment, so that they are not alone on this journey of being a explorer of new technologies, right?
Yeah, one thing on that one that really triggered a thought for me is one of the reasons why, and I don't think everybody understands from if you're not using it, TikTok. One
Mhm.
of the things that if you're going to make a great product, one of the best things is to make your person feel awesome, to feel
Mhm.
like what they made is awesome. And
Mhm.
what TikTok does very well, it's an amazing collaboration tool. The collaboration tool is you can grab anyone's music, you can stitch on anybody's items, you can add to any situation, and you can take what someone already made that was awesome, and you could add your 2 cents. So someone throws in $1 in effort, and then you add your 2 cents on top of that, and you can continue this cycle of collaboration, which is a continuous cycle beyond just creation. It's this collaboration and creation, which is great, which makes me really curious. And I'd love to get your take because you live in
Mhm.
a bunch of different worlds, but two worlds that we haven't addressed yet, right? Is you have China and you have San Francisco, right? And
Right.
then we have Meta, Facebook, Quest, and now we also have ByteDance and Pico, right? And
Mhm.
so what's your thoughts with ByteDance, TikTok, and Pico coming in and going toe to toe with Meta and Facebook and the Quest, since you live in both those different worlds?
Well, I definitely think, at this point, the more players are in the field, the healthier the ecosystem will become, right? So
Mhm.
I think, there has been a very polarized opinion about Facebook or Meta as a company and their role in especially in the metaverse and in the VR AR ecosystem. Some people say that they are the one of the few companies that's investing heavily in this space, and have a strong vision and a real pioneer to push the industry forward. I strongly echo with this statement, and I think without Facebook, the state of the metaverse industry, the state of the VR AR industry wouldn't be the same today, right? But on the flip side, right, we hear certain feedbacks, especially from the indie developer community, right? Community developers that's starting new startups, starting developing new products, that Facebook has been playing a little bit hostile role in this space, and it's not a very easy company to work with to a certain extent, and also because of the huge success of Facebook Quest, they are almost like the monopoly in this ecosystem as well, right? So I think definitely with the ByteDance and also Pico join force here. Pico as a young company will benefit a lot from the huge resource and support on the Pico side, right? On the ByteDance side, and
Yeah.
also for ByteDance, I'm always joking that the world's largest AR app, if you think about it, is actually TikTok.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
why? Because it has one of the largest social network in the
Yeah.
world, and also a lot of content creators on TikTok are using all these AR enhanced features to create their content, right?
Mhm.
Different filters, different special effects, and and also it's very leaning towards consumer entertainment products, right? So I think for TikTok and ByteDance, it has a natural um, it has a natural anchor into the future possibilities in the metaverse world as well, right? So I think first of all, the acquisition between ByteDance and Pico is definitely a win-win situation for both parties. And secondly, by having ByteDance and Pico join force and into this ecosystem and competing with Facebook, I think it's definitely some healthy competitions in terms of Facebook is not only the monopoly, it's no longer the only monopoly in this market, and it has some respectable competitors, and also for especially for the developer community, right? They have more options, and also considering Facebook's relationship with China versus TikTok's relationship with China, right? So it can potentially help the um, developers to open up a whole set of new opportunities geographically as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, you look at when Facebook was, they were going in at say neck to neck with say HTC and Valve and that stuff, and they kind of start to outpace them with the Quest and all that fun stuff. And they had the advantage of it's when this young nimble company pairs with this giant Goliath.
Mhm.
Disney did the same thing with Pixar. There was
Right.
Disney, they got the money. Pixar came out with awesome stuff. They came in and they kind of infused their culture of Pixar into Disney. And then
Mhm.
Oculus did the same thing to Facebook, where they came in and they brought in the cool and the sexy and the awesome. Facebook Meta has the old sexy, which was Facebook. It has the
Mhm.
current-ish sexy, which is Instagram, and it's got the future sexy which is Oculus. But then out of nowhere, TikTok came in strong, started gobbling up everybody's lunch in the social media space, and they really did open my mind to what's possible with augmented reality. Because until then, I thought that most of augmented reality was all business, right? It was all instructional, expert, designs, data overlays, all that kind of stuff. But then you see, oh, wow, you can use augmented reality for a lot of fun. And I'm very curious to see if because the Pico nimble with the Byte Dance kind of big and innovative, they're going to come together. If they're going to take another page out of the Quest book and start to bring in that augmented reality headset with virtual reality, that's one of the things I think is really innovative with the Quest Pro. I don't know if you had a chance to try out the Meta Pro yet, where you put it on and you have the augmented reality environment, and then there's the digital overlay, and they've kind of gotten around the how the heck scientifically do you fit in these little tiny glasses and be able to see your environment? You can't, no matter if you raise $1 billion like Magic Leap and try to fake it the whole time with CGI. They said, oh, no. This is a whole VR headset, and we're going to fake augmented reality by throwing cameras on the outside. And I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And so I'm very curious. Do you think that like Pico and them are going to take a Byte or a Byte Dance out of that business model and try to bring that in? Do you think that's or what do you think they're going to be going with it? What do you think was their move?
I think anything is possible, right? So I think this brings to the bigger question of what's the difference between VR and AR, and which one is going to get bigger, and what's this ultimate product type is going to look like. So for me, I in my personal opinion, I think VR and AR, because of the similarities in terms of technology and because of the similarities in terms of the consumption device, right? I think at the end of the day, it's gonna merge, right? It's gonna be like a one single device, or even like what the Mojo Vision guys does, right? Like contact lenses, right?
Yeah.
So it's this simple device, and if you have certain if you go totally like black out the real world, then it's virtual reality. Versus you have the information overlay, but you still the user still able to see the real world, then it's AR, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of use case, it's always going to be very different use cases, right? Because the goal of VR is, let's say, hey, let's forget about the real world. Let's bring a totally fundamentally different possibilities and fundamentally different larger than life experience to the users. Versus for AR, is always say, hey, reality is great, but how can we make it better, right? How can we make reality more engaging, more fun, more useful, and more practical to our everyday life? So I think both directions from use cases perspective is going to be very different directions. But in terms of the actual device and in terms of the actual product, right, it could merge sometime later on, right? And I think the interesting thing about this TikTok Meta situation is that their core business is always social media, right? Facebook is a social media company, a social media product, right?
Yeah.
And TikTok is also a social media product. So I think, coming from the social angle, it always gonna bring down to the question in terms of, hey, how is this VR AR as a new technology, as a new medium, how it's gonna fit into the next way on how people are connecting with each other, and how this will redefine the relationship between different individuals, and also redefine the way on how we are interacting with each other.
Yeah. And that's the thing. People think of social media, because I gave a talk on this at a meetup group that I run on the new social media. And I talked about the comparisons. And this was a couple of years ago, about comparing Rec Room to Altspace to Horizons to all these different social medias, because that's what it is. This virtual reality where people get together. It's just it's a digital presence social media. So instead of us being, talking heads here, we have hands and arms and bodies, and we can high five and bro hug and anything else that we can think of.
Right.
That is the new kind of social media that we're stepping into, which is really interesting. I think that people haven't recognized that unless they've experienced what is it like to be social inside this new type of media. Have you had, because we talked about the first mind-blowing experience that you had back in the day when you got the cardboard headset. Have you had any types of mind-blowing social VR experiences that you can think of?
Oh, yes. I think, I would say like, 80% of my most mind-blowing experience in the whole like metaverse ecosystem or somehow related to social, right? Um, like you said, like VR chat, Rec Room, Alt Space, Horizons. I'm pretty familiar with all of them, and also, I'm an investor of Population One, right? They were
Oh, nice.
acquired by Facebook, so they were like the PUBG battle first person battle royale,
For
right?
sure.
For VR, and I think that kind of experience take like social gaming to the next level, and also I like to touch base a little bit on the type of the type of things that I have a vantage point to
Sure.
access, but may not be so open to the greater public. Which is, I think the power of the social can be social in the metaverse can be taken to the next level by integrating things like eye tracking, facial tracking, all this kind of different technologies, right? And we can already get a taste of this through the Quest Pro experience, right? Um, we can understand that, hey, it's uh, it's always a magical moment when you step in virtual reality, and it's always a next level magical moment when you are in virtual reality but hanging out with your friends as avatars, right? But it's the next level social experience by be able to step into the virtual reality, hang out with your friends while making eye contact and different facial expression that in a way resemble who they really are, right? So I think uh, 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 I like just like 6 7 years ago I would have imagined that the VR headset as of 2018 2019 timeframe, this
Yeah.
kind of second or third generation of headset we already have adopted, eye tracking, facial tracking, 4VT rendering, all these technologies as default technology inside the headset. Of course, looking back, I feel like I have been a little bit over optimistic and
Sure.
things are happening a little bit slower than what I had expected, right? But I think, these things are inevitable. And all these, next level magical social experiences are still yet to be discovered and yet to be experienced by the general public yet, right? So as technology evolving forward, the device is only gonna get cheaper and better. And I think these are the things that's inevitable. And when the hardware, when the price point, when the overall experience hits to that tipping point, I think that's a time when the next stage of all this social VR applications and also social metaverse applications have a chance to really take off and blow out the market as well.
I absolutely agree on this one. There's different mind-blowing things. I think being in the VR space for a while, you get jaded, right? When I first got started,
Mhm.
oh my God, VR is awesome, right? And then you get used to it. And I was in VR for a while, and I got jaded, right? And then I jumped in and I got into social VR, and then social VR blew my mind. I was back into it. I remember doing quest mode on Rec Room with my
Hmm.
friends, cutting them, stabbing them. One guy's down, I run up and I high five him. Right? Those magic moments that you go to save a friend, right? And then when I saw the social gestures inside of the new Pro, that was
Mhm.
another one of those magic moments. And especially when they start to do the augmented reality plus the social gestures. And I think you're right. That social gestures, the human presence, me being able to like shake my hands and go like this, or like look at you sideways, go, yeah, bro. Like, that right there, those types of moments where you feel that deep connection
Right.
and you still have that headset. I agree. It's just not there yet. And the headsets are so expensive. And that's why
Mhm.
I think, Oculus Meta decided to do the enterprise route where they know what's needed doesn't match the price point of what people are paying currently. Right. So they said,
Definitely.
okay, we're going to give you the experience that you need, but we need it. We need to go to the top, the Elon Musk style, where he has the Roadster for $100,000, and then eventually it's going to drop down to 30 something thousand dollars, and everybody can go have a Tesla. I feel like
Mhm.
that's the move that Meta's trying to take because they know what's needed to get it done. But right now, they're just that the money isn't there to make it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
also, getting back to one of your point,
Mm.
I think it's also particularly important for people like us, right? We are the pioneers, explorers in this industry, in this field, and for us to pick up these new technologies and to use it, right? So I've done certain like meetings instead of especially during the pandemic, instead of going to Zoom, right? I met with my my colleagues and my partners in VR chat, and also when meeting up with some other VCs, we've done a bank robbery session inside GTA. So I think
A bunch
um,
of VCs robbing a bank.
right. Do you know Angelo from HP? So
Yeah.
I did the GTA together with Angelo as well. Um, so
So
yeah,
great.
so I think it's interesting when you are actually not only being amazed by this
Mm,
technology and understand what it delivers, but also try to use this kind of product in um, in your everyday life to see what kind of what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what explains the adoption curve, and what kind of potential hurdle that you haven't realized before you try it, right? So for example, it take me and Angelo like 20 minutes to figure out how to meet with each other in the GTA environment, and go into the same room to see each other's avatar, right? So
yeah.
that's some hurdle, but at the same time it's a fun experience for me, for him, and also it's a different one, right? It definitely feels more memorable than just doing a Zoom meeting, just doing another Zoom meeting, right? I can still remember, oh, we talk about these kind of topics while we are robbing the bank that day, right? So it's I think we are all explorers in this journey, so we need to be like get our get our feet wet in this journey as well.
Yeah, and what's great about this is we think about this, right? I mean, humans, what we'd like to do is we'd like to go on experiences together. There's a thing like if a father and a son play catch together, they can have a more meaningful conversation versus they just sit there and stare at each other across the room, right?
Right.
We feel like we're freed up a little bit more when we're doing something together, whether it's fishing or whether it's robbing a bank or any of these types of activities. You're going out and you're experiencing something with someone else, and along the way you have fun, but you also have like a deep, meaningful, powerful conversation in whatever thing that you guys want to talk about. The only
Mhm.
issue is that challenges. I kind of feel a little bit like if my grandma tried to get on the internet and try to explain to her how to use Zoom, that's kind of
Mhm.
how I feel it is for us trying right now to get into VR or get into Roblox. If you've never done it before, there's going to be
Right.
this learning curve versus the younger people that have a better adoption rate. They're going to get through that grind. They will fight through it to get to that fun, and it's going to be normal to them, while we have to kind of adapt and change who we are because we're so used to Facebook and growing up with Facebook and all that stuff. So I love the fact that you did it, but you're right. The friction right now is still too high
Mhm.
to get mass adoption, but things that are making it smoother, easier, better, faster, that lowers the friction for people to get in to do this type of stuff is going to be the ones that win the race at the end of the day.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, can you talk to me about some experiences that you've had as an investor? Maybe some lessons or some stories, some regrets. Either you had some big swings and hits or big swings and misses as
Mhm.
being an investor, so that people can kind of get a bit of an inside perspective of what is it like to experience the highs and lows of being an investor.
Well, I think definitely, on the being an investor, you always have a short-term vision versus a long-term vision, right? The short-term vision, with a short-term vision, when you are evaluating a startup, you always look into the team, the technology, the competitors, and the stage of the company, right? So these are like your basic formula when you are evaluating like any kind of early stage startups, right? But the in the long term vision, you need to kind of like having certain understanding about the the cycles of the industry, right? So for each of the sectors that I focus on, like the VR, AR, metaverse industry, the AI sector, right, the
Mhm.
blockchain sector, it all has certain um, period where it's like, hyped up, everybody's super excited about it, you see a lot of money coming in, and there are always these lows where you see, like, it's no longer sexy, it's um uh, it's kind of feels like lost its traction, nobody talk about it anymore, uh and and a lot of people are leaving this industry to pursue some other careers as well, right? So I think, for me, like I previously mentioned, each of these sectors are um, are those type of technology that's groundbreaking, that's gonna completely change the human history forever, right? It's super powerful, right? Each of this technology is as important as the internet itself, but in order to really make that type of impact, it takes time, right? There won't be overnight success, right? So I think, as an investor in this space, I need to understand what's the cycle of each of the sector, when it's going to hype up, when it's going to hit another deep, and when do we expect the startup founders to start fundraising, and when we expect them to start heads down building, and when it is a time for them to spend the money, recruit talents, and when is it what's the best time for them to make the decision to cut down their cost, uh, get back to the lean mode, focus on product building rather than focus on growth, right? So
Mhm.
I think, that having a long-term mentality, and also understand the cycle of this kind of technology, and how cycles of different technology is impacting your day-to-day business decisions. I think that's something that me as an investor, I have the perspective of, but could be blinded to a lot of startup founders as well.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So then if you understand what the cycle is, you understand what the energy of the community is doing, you can tell when things are gonna be lean and when they need to kind of, tighten their belts, and when
Mhm.
they need to be able to kind of double down and really, you know, eat as many resources as they can to try to produce as much they can, so that when the winter does come, they're able to propel and get past that to get to that next cycle, to get to that next phase.
Yes, and you
Yeah.
almost always wanted to do this a little bit like one step ahead of the curve, right? So if you know that there's another hype coming, there's not another hype, there's another wave of excitement, traction coming. There will be a lot of money coming to this sector, so that's probably the best time for you to start fundraising. You can
Mhm.
start hiring new teams, start picking up your growth, right? Versus when the market is already hyped up, right? The tractions has already been made, and all these new startup are coming into this field. Um, that's probably a little bit too late to start executing on these things, right? So in order to gain this kind of advantage, you almost want it to be like one step ahead of the curve.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. See it coming before it gets here, so you're already set up. When the train arrives, you've got your town built already.
Hmm.
I love that. And
Right.
so with all of this, I mean, you're super deep in the space. You've obviously you're an OG in VR, and it seems like you're bleeding edge with the AI and the crypto and gaming and esports, especially back in Pop One. This
Hmm.
is incredible. Great move on your part for that one. It's an
Thank you.
epic game. Uh, for you, what's your holy grail in all of this stuff? I know why you got out of the financial space, but what do you hope to achieve by putting all of your effort and energy in this kind of bleeding edge technology?
Well, I think it remind this question kind of remind me of who I am and what motivates me, right? And I think um, back then when I moved from New York City to San Francisco and switched my career from being an investment banker to a venture capitalist, is that back then it was a huge risk for me to after especially after 5 years in investment banking in an environment that I'm very familiar with, pays well and have a promising career path to a completely new and different environment, right? And I think back then my motivation was I want to work on something that's creative and that I feel meaningful, right? And I think to me the way I feel I could live a meaningful life and I can have everyday um, fulfilling my purpose is that I feel like I'm an explorer on this journey, right? I'm curious about a lot of new things. I want to see I want to see a lot of new things happen, and I want to stay a little bit ahead of the curve so that I can have certain level of impact to 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 how these new technologies or these new sectors are impacting our everyday life, right? So that's what motivates me, and I think to in order to be successful on this journey, um, I need to keep my curiosity. I need to keep learning on new stuff, right? And also I need to have a mentality that you know um, I'm learning from whoever I'm interacting with, right? So, being a venture capitalist, I'm constantly learning from the startups I'm talking to, right? So, a
Mhm.
lot of startups, the conversation between me and the startups is more like I'm the generalist. Look, I look into a lot of VR startups. I look into a lot of crypto startup, but I may not be a expert, for example, in education. While I'm listening, I'm talking to a VR education startup, right? Or I might not be a expert in the decentralized system architecture when I talk to a layer one protocol, right? So I think it's a constantly learning and improving process for me myself. So I feel like this journey has definitely been very rewarding to me, and also being able to understand different perspective in terms of what it feels like to be an investor. What's the perspective of startup founder? What's the market perspective, right? From the primary market versus the secondary market, right? I think all these different perspective is helpful for me to understand how things could grow from a safe stage company into a large public company, right? um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I think overall, it's a journey of exploration, and
Mm.
it's a constantly learning experience. And I do feel that this kind of experience is very fulfilling, and is a way for me to make my impact while this technologies is shifting humanities and the entire world to a different level and to a different reality.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
So it sounds to me like the holy grail for you is to be constantly learning and kind of pushing this technology forward and being at this bleeding edge and really kind of helping facilitate this change happen in this direction.
Mhm.
If that's the case, what is the dragon? What is the thing that is the most difficult thing for you to overcome? So much so you might need to transform who you are to get to where you want to go.
Well, that's a great question. I think, it's definitely not um, it's definitely not an easy task to be a constant learner, right? And I feel like, in order to keep my knowledge and keep my game up to pace, right? Um, you definitely need to constantly learning, and you definitely need to be able to open to a lot of new things constantly, right?
Mhm.
Also, you need to understand how you can filter information to understand, okay, which information is authentic and what part of the information is noise, right? You need to keep a healthy like information to noise ratio
Yeah.
in whatever you are interacting with. And I think the most the most challenging part is really how can you have your own unique thinking in this process? Because I feel like, especially when I sit on a lot of panels and when I um, talk to a group of people who's from a very specific community, right? Um, People um, um, tend to agree with each other, and almost in a certain extent like repeating the buzzword and repeating certain statement um, from one another, right? But where's the critical thinking part? What do you think strongly about something that you feel like it's different opinion, or even the contrary opinion to like the majority of how people think about certain things, right? So I think that's something very challenging, but that's something that's critically important, right? Because that's what's differentiate a outstanding individual versus a mediocre individual, right? So anyone in a certain industry can definitely repeat whoever said, oh, metaverse is amazing, decentralization amazing, immutable is very powerful. But what's what's your counter opinion to that, right?
Yeah.
What kind of opinion do you hold strongly that is different from 99% of people in that industry? And I think those type of insights are some of the key differentiators in this game, and those are certain some of the most drivers that can help you to outperform the average in the industry as well. So yeah, I think
Love that.
critical thinking and unique thoughts.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's funny because the conversation now has gone full circle towards the end, because in the beginning you asked me what makes this podcast different than the Tim Ferriss podcast, and so it seems like you're understand that gap between the industry, right, and the unique individuals in the industry who make the outlier thinking. And if their outlier thinking is one step ahead of everybody else, whether they're predicting the rise, their downfall, or they have a unique strategy, or they have a unique approach, that right there separates the good industry from the great players in the space. And now I kind of understand a bit more of how that thinking would actually help to make you reflect better, because you can understand all these outliers. You can start to synthesize your own opinions and start to make these unique pattern recognitions that most people won't, by understanding those key differences.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Ryan, it's been absolutely awesome to have you on the show. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I am on most social media. So, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm very approachable, and I'm always looking for something different and something that can be, fundamentally more interesting and something fundamentally unique. So, yeah, if you have something that you are super excited about, share it with me, and would love to have a conversation.
Beautiful. Ryan, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure and an honor, my friend, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you.
See you
Bye
on the
now.
other side.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening.